Welcome to the third video of the introduction to IFS, or internal family system, as a therapeutic approach. In this video, I want to focus on the 6 Fs, or presented visually, I want to focus on the main steps that the IFS approach uses when working with protectors. Now, I want to give a short overview over the whole IFS approach, and I want to do it using this very simple graphic, which is going to be explained in the next 2 videos. So basically, these are all the steps, all the kind of phases of the IFS approach, and they can be separated into 2 different phases. There is working with protectors, which is commonly known as the 6 Fs, at least in the IFS Institute, Richard Schwartz way. Jay Early has his own terminology. I'm going to stick with 6 Fs in this video. So the 6 Fs of working with protectors, and then there are different steps that we can use when working with witnessing and also unburdening exiles. Overall, these can be kind of looked at as 2 separate phases of the work. And in this video, I want to focus on the first one, the working with protectors, the 6 Fs. And 6 Fs, again, alliteration, stands for the 6 steps when working with protectors, which is finding, focusing, fleshing out, and then feeling towards, befriending, and fears. Those are the 6 steps of working, getting to know, etc., protectors, and they can be loosely, and often in many books they are separated in different chapters, separated into 2 phases, which is phase number 1, finding, focusing, and fleshing out, and then phase number 2, which is feeling towards, befriending, and fears, and I'm going to present them in these 2 phases as well. For the rest of this video, I want to now walk you through the 6 Fs, one at a time, and I want to explain to you what the step is about, maybe offer a few questions that are often used in this step of the therapy or the coaching, and I want to have one example that runs through all of these steps so you get a sense of how that could look in a real session. Step 1 of the 6 Fs is find, or finding. And basically what this step entails is the step moving from somebody's problems, a client's, a patient's problems, towards exploring parts. A lot of times in this first step, when we're working with somebody, when we're still trying to find parts and find the ones that are active with a certain problems, it often involves steps like introducing parts language. So for some people, maybe coming to therapy, coming to coaching, coming to a session, they don't know what parts are. That's nothing they've ever heard about. So it is important to introduce the concept, the language, etc., just to see, is that something they can relate to? Is that something they're willing to explore? Along that, there is the point of identifying parts. So when they are talking about problems, when they are talking about challenges, how can we identify maybe different parts that are involved in this specific challenge and this specific problem that somebody has? A little note here, especially as people become more equipped in identifying and connecting with their own parts, a lot of clients will often then start to come with parts they want to explore, even though in the beginning of a journey with somebody, it's often problems, and it's really the step of finding parts connected to the problem. And one way I like to look at this step is to turn experience into parts. So let's go to this drawing here. As somebody is exploring or explaining or talking about a problem they have, they will be experiencing certain things. There will be certain thoughts going along with that. There will be feelings. There will be maybe movements, etc., etc. And I find that one very helpful way to think of this finding step is to relate to those thoughts, to those feelings, to those elements as if they're coming to a part. So we relate to that and we then move towards identifying a part with that. That's why this drawing has this turning it into a part. So to maybe start off, and I want to also give you an example of a session, a simplified session, so we keep it brief and to the point, but a session where a client goes through all of these steps of the IFS process. So in the first video, the 6 Fs, going through the steps of the protector work, and in the second video about the Exile-Work, going through those steps. And I want to take you step by step through how a session could look with a woman, roughly 40, who's having relationship struggles. So she's coming to a session because things are going wrong in her relationship. And as she talks about what's going on, the thing she keeps repeating is, I get so angry. So what is the problem for her is that in situations that don't seem as big, she gets incredibly angry and she wants to figure out what's going on and how she can change that behavior. And as she talks about that and she talks about getting so angry, actually in the session, that anger, that comes up, it's active in her. And step 1 of the process in finding parts is to figure out with her, is it okay if we relate to that anger as a part? Is it okay for her that we explore that as a part? And in this example, she's okay with exploring the anger as an angry part. If the client is going along with that and she can identify a part, relate to that as a part, we got to step number 2, which is focusing. This is the step of focusing on the part we just identified, or turning our awareness towards that part. Oftentimes, this step can include going inside and kind of exploring more. It can mean taking a moment to stay with the experience, the thoughts, the feelings that go along with that, to name whatever it is that we're exploring there. It's just about having the awareness, the attention inside with the part and really turning towards that. So continuing the example, we identified the angry part, and in step 2, it's about focusing on that part and staying with it. And as she stays with the part, she describes it as, it is raging. And she describes how the part is yelling, and it's really intense because this part seems to be so angry that it's raging in her. And while we explore that, asking her, and what could you call that part? And the name she comes up with is hothead. This is the hothead part. It's the part that is just explosive. And when it comes up, there's rage. It is raging. There is all of that anger. When we've done that, when we've found a part, we've focused on it, we've learned a little bit more about it and have a way to return to the part, the next step is to just do even more of that, which is called the fleshing out part of learning about a part. What is it thinking? What is its role? Etc., etc. With a little bit more words, it's exploring the part and learning about the part. What is that part like? What does it say? What does it want? What does it feel? And what are you aware of? What are you noticing as you stay with the part? It's really about fleshing out the experience and all the information we have about the part, which might be, some of it might be the part telling us stuff, some of it might be what we're feeling in our body, we might see visuals. All of this is information of how we can flesh out this part and learn about the hothead. So to continue the example, she's found the angry part. As she stayed with it, focused on it, she found a name for it, the hothead. And the hothead was raging. And as it was further about fleshing out the part, about learning more about it, exploring it, what came up when she asked the part if there's anything it wants her to know is that the part really wants me to be heard. That's what she said. The part really wants me to be heard. And as she expressed that, it was like there was an energy rising in her, and an energy that was not just anger, but actually like a force. So the part is raging. It's a hothead. It can explode, but it also wants her to be heard, to be seen. And that seems to be really important for this part. Now, these were the first 3 steps of the 6F process. It was finding a part, focusing on it, fleshing it out. What is really important to know is that this can be incredibly quick. Sometimes this can be 3 sentences. What are you coming with? Oh, there's this part. Oh, what does the part want? It can be very quick, but it can also take a long time. Sometimes as we are exploring a part, as people are maybe not as used to going inside with their attention, also as we get to really difficult topics, it can be that a lot of other parts come up, that there's a lot of distraction, that all of these things happen, which often have to do with the system seeing, can it trust the therapist, the coach, also parts being worried about the exploration, etc. All of this is normal. So when this goes really quick and in 30 seconds you have a part and you've fleshed it out, great. If it takes a whole session, 3 sessions to get to know the part, also great. There is no right speed, there is no right tempo for this. It's just about learning about the part, connecting with experience, learning to go inside, etc., etc. So now I'd like to focus on the next phase of the 6F process, which is these ones, feeling towards, befriending, and fears. They come after the first 3 steps. We don't start just randomly with these, but they basically build on what we've done before. So that's just important to keep in mind. And the feel towards step is called feel towards because that's usually the question used in this step. What happens here is we've identified a part, we've learned about it, and now we get to the next phase of exploring with this part, which is checking for self-energy and unblending if needed. The classic IFS question that is asked here is, once we've learned about the hothead, once we know what it's doing, what is important to it, we see, and what do you feel towards the part? What do you feel towards the hothead right now? Now, here, we don't just go learn more about this part, but actually we check, how are we relating to this part right now? How is it for me, whatever that me might be, to be with this right now? And this opens up a whole new dynamic in the IFS process. So basically what we're doing with that question is we check for the internal relationship, and through however somebody answers this question, we can discern quite well, are they in self or connected to their self? Is there self-energy? Or is there a part right now? And this is very important because especially as we want to build a relationship with the part, as we want to explore it more deeply, we make it so much easier for ourselves and the part, the more self-energy is there. So this question really allows us to check that. And if there is a part, meaning, for instance, answering the question, what do you feel towards that part? And the answer is, I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. In this perspective, the self wouldn't say that. The self wouldn't want to get rid of the part. So if there is another part there, or if we are super blended with the part we're exploring, we can unblend from it, meaning consciously create some separation from the part. This can be through asking the part to step aside. This can be through doing a grounding meditation and then returning to the part. All of these can help to create more self, to not to create more self, but to connect to self and to then reconnect with the part, because we have so many more options when self-energy and self are present. So to continue the example, we found the angry part. She stayed with it. The name for it was the hothead, and it wants her to be heard. And as we got to the feeling towards, to exploring, how is it for her to be with that part? What does she feel towards the part? As soon as that question was asked, it was clear that I am scared. It could end and break the relationship. And there was actually visible fear in her that this part could really ruin her relationship. And mapping this onto self and part, the guess would be that that's probably a part that is scared. So in this feeling towards, the question is it okay to call that a part too? That part that is scared. And she was okay with also turning that experience, calling that experience a part. And to unblend from it, she asked it to give her some space. Can you ask the part to give you some space or step aside a little bit? And, the part was a little bit reluctant at first, it did. And as it stepped aside, it was like something in her body relaxed. Something calmed down. When she was asked again, what do you feel towards the hothead now? It's like, oh, I'm curious towards it. I'm open and I wanna get to know it. I wanna understand what makes it so angry, raging. And I really wanna understand why it is so important for it that I am heard. So she had access to self, and with that, the session could move forward. And one of the big steps that can then happen when there is the self and the part is to befriend the part, befriend the protector, which basically means building a relationship between the self and the part. And a few steps that are really, really helpful for this is, number one, sharing self-energy. She is curious about the part. She's genuinely open towards the part. And one thing to do can be, can you share that with the part? Can you show that to the part or tell the part and see what happens then? And sometimes, even as we share the part, as we tell it, I'm really curious about you, it doesn't notice that. It's not aware that there's anybody there. So sometimes to share self-energy, we have to make the part aware of the self, which can happen through talking to it, through kind of imagining looking at it or touching it. But basically, this can be the foundation of a relationship. And to continue the example, she unblended from the scared part. She was open towards the hothead. And to move on further in the session, the first thing is to befriend the hothead. And one step for this can be to share self-energy with it. So asking her if she can share that openness and that curiosity with the part, if she can tell the part that she's open and curious towards it. And as she did it, the part was kind of confused at first. It was like, whoa, what? Where's that coming from? Because it's so used to trying to be pushed away, to other parts being angry at it, to other people not liking it. But once the part could realize, wow, there's really somebody there that is curious, that's open towards me, the part is really happy that somebody's there. So that's also the building the relationship, sharing self-energy, and also seeing what is that like for the part. How does the part feel towards her? And with that sense of, wow, it's so nice that somebody's there, something in the part could relax a little bit. It got a little bit smaller, less intense, which is actually a wonderful base to then explore further. So this is the building the relationship in that session where she can build a relationship with the hothead, where the hothead knows there is the self. She shares the curiosity, the openness with the part, and it's moving on from there. And once there is a relationship, once the part is aware of the self and it has relaxed a little bit, we can get to the sixth F, being fears. A lot of times it can be incredibly helpful to explore the fears a part has. What is it worried about? To understand what drives the part so strongly. Parts, protectors, are spending so much energy, so much time on their strategies, which they often don't even want to do, but they feel like they have to. There's so much drive behind that. And that often has to do with quite specific fears and worries of what could happen if they stop. So in the 6th step, it's about exploring those fears and basically learning, why is this part doing this? One question that can work a lot of times with this is, what is the part afraid could happen if it stopped doing this, if it didn't do this, if she wasn't heard? And one of the things to keep in mind, this often points towards exiles. So the fears often have something to do with current situations, but also oftentimes something with the past that is not just recent right now. And to continue the example of the session with the woman and the hothead, as she explored, what is the part where it could happen if it didn't explode, if it didn't get so angry and so loud? The first answer to that was almost immediate. As soon as she asked, what are you worried could happen? It was, you don't get respect. And this answer was kind of like, didn't fully make sense to her. So one of the things you can do, and that happened in this session, is to ask, and when I don't get respect, when I'm not respected, what are you afraid could happen then? And the answer to that was, you could be walked all over. And as the part shared that she got this picture of these huge people kind of walking and trampling on her, and that she was like, oh, I can get that. That's not cool. But again, she still didn't fully get what the part was so worried about. So she asked one more time this question of, and if people were to walk all over you, what is it afraid could happen then? And when the part shared that, it's like the body and the somatic expression on her shifted, because she shared, it's worried that I could feel worthless again. And something got a lot more tender and fragile there. And listening, I guess, is, oh, this is exactly that thing that could point towards an exile. Feel worthless again. And that touched her, and she shared that with the part 2, which again is building that relationship, befriending. And the part was happy to see it touched her, it reached her, what he's been trying to avoid for so long. But the fear is feeling worthless again. And in this session, that was also the step to move beyond exploring the protector and actually moving towards the Exile-Work. And with this, we kind of get a sense of, oh, that's the driver underneath. It's wanting to be heard, it's wanting to not be walked over, but it's also, and maybe most of all, I don't want to feel worthless again. And that's what drives the part. And that's why with this exploration of the fears, there's often a natural transition to also working with exiles and exploring exiles here, because they are so often involved. And that's going to be the next video, the transition to exile work, and giving you an overview, a taste for what that could mean. But also I want to just give you, a very short taste of another incredibly important element or powerful element, which can be negotiation. So at this place where there's often a possibility to work more deeply with exiles, there can also be a place to, my picture's in the way, with exiles, there can also be a place to really deeply negotiate with protectors, because oftentimes, even without changing or healing an exile, we can find new ways of dealing with the same situation that are more helpful to the system. And this can be done through negotiating with protectors about what they would need to act differently, and what support they would need from the self to change things. And this can be a very powerful perspective, especially in coaching, when we don't always want to go towards the exiles, the deep pain, but we want to just help people to realign their system. It can really be powerful to negotiate, and also for everyday life, major skill to be able to listen to parts, to protectors, but then find different ways of getting the parts what they need, can be a game changer. So in negotiation, it's really about how can we deal with this situation in a way that satisfies you, but in a way that also is different. What does the protector, what does the part need for that? And that's a very powerful perspective that I will probably do a video on later in a few months when I'm getting more into the coaching stuff. So that's it. Those are the 6 F's, the main steps in the IFS approach to work with protectors. Finding, focusing, fleshing out, feeling towards, befriending, and then exploring fears. I hope this video gave you a good overview. If you enjoy these videos, please share them. That really helps me. And beyond that, see you next video.
You never know what's around the next corner. So.